What if I told you that the person you're most afraid to become is exactly who you're meant to be, not the version that smiles on cue, not the one keeping it together while quietly falling apart inside, the version you buried, the one you were told was too much, too intense, too angry, too wild. That version, the one hiding in the shadow. You think you're making your own choices. But what if your whole life has been a performance? A mask carefully built to be accepted, to be safe. And behind that mask, there's a voice you've silenced so many times you barely recognize it anymore. You tell yourself you're fine, that your life is good. But there's a quiet, aching hollowness that returns. In the middle of the night, in the moments your smile fades and you're left with that question, whose life am I actually living? Carl Jung believed our deepest suffering doesn't come from trauma or pain. It comes from fragmentation, from disowning parts of ourselves we've labeled bad, dangerous, shameful, not because they truly are, because someone once taught us they were. Maybe your family told you anger is ugly. That ambition is selfish. Maybe society told you vulnerability is weakness, that being different is something to fix. So you split. You hid the parts that didn't fit. And those parts didn't disappear. They sank into the unconscious, into what Jung called the shadow. And there, in the dark, they grew. Now, without realizing it, those disowned parts are running your life. They show up as sabotage, anxiety, broken relationships, fake smiles, unexplained emptiness, symptoms of a self you've betrayed. You're not lost. You're not broken. You're just divided. And wholeness will never come from trying to be more perfect. It comes when you finally turn toward the things you were taught to fear. This is not about becoming your best self. It's about becoming your real self, the one buried under years of conditioning and shame. Because until you face your shadow, you will never be free. So let me ask you again, what if the person you're most afraid to be is the only one who can save you? Since you were a child, you've been learning who to be. Not who you are, who you're supposed to be. Praised for being polite, punished for being loud. Slowly, you began shaping yourself around what others expected. The obedient son, the agreeable friend. And with every smile that wasn't real, you constructed what Jung called the persona, the mask. At first it was survival, reasonable, even smart. But over time, the mask became your identity. You started believing you are who you pretend to be. But deep down you know better. There's a part of you that whispers late at night, there's more to me than this. The persona isn't the enemy. We all need one to function. But the moment you forget it's a role, you lose something essential. You start censoring your thoughts, suppressing your emotions. You call it maturity. In truth, it's self-abandonment. How often do you say yes when you mean no? Smile while resentful? Stay quiet when your soul is screaming to speak. You're not being strong. You're being invisible. Jung warned us, every calling lies hidden in the shadow of the mask. The version of you that wants to create, to speak truth, to break rules. That version was exiled so the persona could survive. But here's the secret most people never face. The parts of you that don't fit in are not your flaws. They're the keys to your liberation. Your anger is your boundary. Your ambition is your drive. Your desire is your vitality. What you repress becomes your prison. What you reclaim becomes your power. There's a place inside you where everything you've ever denied has been buried. It didn't disappear. It went underground. Jung called it the shadow, the unconscious dimension, where everything that doesn't fit the persona gets exiled. Every time you felt rage and were told to calm down, every time you stayed quiet instead of speaking, those parts had nowhere to go, so you pushed them down. And the more you repress something, the more power it gains over you. That self-doubt that won't leave. That anger that erupts from nowhere. That pattern repeating in your relationships. That's not just how life is. That's your shadow running the show from behind the curtain. Jung warned, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Much of what you call choice is actually compulsion. A defense mechanism dressed up as a plan. And here's the most dangerous part. The shadow doesn't just hold what you fear. It holds what you need. Your power, your vitality, your creativity, your raw instinct to live. They're all in there, locked away. Most people run, terrified that letting it out makes them dangerous. But the real danger is not integrating it. Because what you repress will find a way out anyway. Through breakdowns, addictions, emptiness. So the real question is, do you want to keep pretending you're fine? Or are you finally ready to look at what you've hidden? If integrating your shadow were easy, everyone would do it. Fear stands in the way. Not casual fear. Existential fear. The kind that threatens your sense of safety and belonging. The first fear, If I accept my shadow, I'll become a bad person. You've been taught your darker impulses define your morality. But Jung saw this as a tragic misunderstanding. The shadow isn't only cruelty, it's everything you were forced to disown. When these energies are unconscious, they become destructive. When they're conscious, they become choice. Integration doesn't make you immoral. It makes you responsible. The second fear, if I'm authentic, I'll be rejected. Jung never sugarcoated this. Yes, some people will reject you. But here's what most never confront. You're already being rejected. Just not by others, by yourself. Every time you silence your truth to keep the peace, you reinforce the most painful rejection of all, self-abandonment. There is no path where everyone approves. You have to choose who you're willing to disappoint. Then there's the fear of power. If I claim it, I'll hurt others. But Jung made a crucial distinction. Repressing power doesn't make you peaceful. It makes you weak and resentful. True power isn't domination. It's boundaries. Saying no. When power is denied, it leaks sideways, through sarcasm, manipulation, self-sabotage. And finally, the deepest fear. I don't know who I am without my defenses. You've built your identity around what you're not. I'm not angry. I'm not intense. But integrating those traits means your old identity collapses. And that feels like death. Jung understood this. Individuation requires a symbolic death of the false self. What feels like annihilation is actually rebirth. You don't lose yourself. You finally meet yourself. Modern culture loves to romanticize self-discovery. Find your true self, as if your soul is a treasure waiting at a yoga retreat. Jung knew better. Becoming who you truly are isn't discovery. It's destruction. He called it individuation. Becoming a whole, integrated self. Not just the polished image you show the world, but the full spectrum. Light and dark, noble and animal. You don't find yourself by asking, who am I? You find yourself by asking, what have I disowned to survive? The more rejected a part of you is, the more critical it is to your wholeness. The parts you're most ashamed of, your rage, your wildness, aren't obstacles. They're the keys. But claiming them means going through a kind of death. The death of the persona, the mask fused to your identity. That's why individuation hurts. It often starts with crisis, a breakup, a burnout, a sense your life no longer fits. And that's the psyche cracking open. This is not a breakdown. It's a breakthrough. Jung said, there is no coming to consciousness without pain. You must let parts of your identity die so something more real can be born. And that doesn't happen through theory. It happens through action, through risk, through courage. So, how do you actually do this work? Start by pulling your projections back. What you most hate or obsess over in others is often a mirror of what you've disowned in yourself. List 5 traits that trigger you. Arrogance, laziness, coldness. Then ask, where does this live in me? This isn't about shame. It's about reclaiming power. Next, try active imagination. A Jungian method where you visualize the part of yourself you fear most as a figure and let it speak. Ask it, why are you here? What do you want? Often what you feared isn't a monster. It's a part of you that's been exiled. So long it had to scream to be heard. The mask kept you safe, but it was never the whole truth of who you are. The version of you that's waiting in the shadow, angry. Ambitious, wild, alive isn't the threat. It's the way home.